Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
The amazing thing is about St. Louis is that we have an enormous amount of talent here.
I think sometimes art can just be fun, and it could just make you smile.
This is cool work. It's impressive, and it's happening right here in St. Louis.
Today on Spotlight, a one-of-a-kind novel that combines comic books and a world of mystery. Meet this award-winning suspense writer. Plus, colorful art reflects on nostalgia, why this local artist says these symbols are important to him. And then an impressive $2.2 billion raised by BioGenerator's homegrown companies. But first, how one group is trying to make our city a hub for emerging storytellers. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
Imagine if the iconic image of the Hollywood sign were replaced by this to symbolize U.S. movie making. It may never go quite that far, but if one local group has its way, it will soon move a step closer.
St. Louis Filmworks is an economic initiative to grow the infrastructure and the ecosystem for the entertainment and media industry. We are a 501c3 that is really focused on our mission is to become a go-to hub for emerging storytellers.
St. Louis Filmworks plans to do that by taking a page from the economic development game plan used by the St. Louis technology sector.
Or you can't have Google come in and say, you know, we're going to open up an office and hire 1,500 people. That's not going to happen because St. Louis does not have the talent or the resources there. So in order to bridge that gap, they started something like Arch Grants to give away $50,000 grants to attract companies. And they began to build a grassroots ecosystem. Now, eventually, 20 years later, that's gotten to the point of where now Square is hiring 1,500 people, and Accenture's coming in and bringing 1,400 people. But we had to get to that point. So with St. Louis Filmworks is what we're doing is we're offering grants to bring in storytellers to build up the crew, the experience, and so forth, to get to that point where now we can compete.
A lot of people don't understand the enormity and the economic impact of this industry and the fact that it is a $2.1 trillion industry. In production alone, you're pushing almost $50 billion. It employs a vast amount of people in 34 different industries per production. When you start thinking about production, a lot of people think about the directors and the writers and the stars, and they'll think of the production side, but they don't really realize all the ancillary businesses that are impacted, from dry cleaners and rental houses and printing companies and car rentals, hospitality. So you have such an enormous impact when you're building an infrastructure here. The amazing thing is about St. Louis is that we have an enormous amount of talent here. The cool thing about St. Louis is that we can also morph into almost any look and feel. It's cheaper to film here. The accessibility here is terrific, right? And what you have to spend in order to shoot in LA or some of these other areas is much more expensive.
So like when Up in the Air was shot here, you know, the premise of that movie is that George Clooney was going around from city to city to city. Most of that was shot in St. Louis. So St. Louis was a body double, if you will, for Detroit or Philadelphia or Dallas, you know, because it has so many looks. And one of the scenes, I think his girlfriend lived in Chicago, well, that was actually shot in Lafayette Square.
Our overall initiative, our 10-15-year initiative, focused on creating that new narrative and that window into our world, making sure that we have great grants available to draw on those emerging storytellers, have an accelerator program that gives them the resources that they need in order to survive and thrive. And then the infrastructure, then it's the campus part, and it's having that studio hub.
And those efforts already seem to be paying dividends.
We'd like to basically build out our headquarters here in St. Louis. I'm from here, some of my staff are from here, but they live throughout the country. So we have people based in Miami and Chicago and other parts of the country, as well as my production president is also based in Los Angeles as well. So we feel that we would have to have a footprint there, but we feel that this could be home base, and that's where we want to be. We need to position ourselves somewhere where we can lead the way. We can be part of a team that leads the way. And that's what we feel like we're a part of. We feel like we're associated with SLFW because they're leading the way.
Ideally, what we want to do is offer 3 grants per year. We have $250,000, that's $750,000 a year to do 3 films over the course of 5 years. So hopefully in 5 years, we'll be able to produce 15 features with a goal to get 9 to 12 of them in distribution. And that would be like Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon Prime.
Any money that we are granting to the filmmaker, the emerging storyteller coming here to start their career and find their portfolio pieces, is that it's a line of credit that has to be utilized to be spent in our ecosystem, meaning anything that can be purchased here or rented here, and services and crew and members, they need to hire them here. So it organically pumps money back into our infrastructure to add sustainability.
I would love to have film students around the country, maybe even around the world, when they talk about their projects, someone said like, hey, you know what, have you looked into St. Louis? You know what St. Louis is doing? You know, you gotta check out St. Louis. And therefore, it's like every emerging storyteller, every film student will be looking at St. Louis Filmworks going like, I want to do that.
HEC Media. Recognized. Celebrated. Honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
Author Alex Segura has made a name for himself in the suspense genre as the author of the acclaimed Pete Fernandez detective fiction series, while keeping one foot in the world of comic books. He's currently a senior vice president at the graphic novel publisher Oni Press and has previously worked at DC Comics and Archie Comics. His own comic books include stints writing The Archies and the graphic novel The Black Ghost. In Alex's highly anticipated new novel, Secret Identity, he combines his love of comics with his mastery of the literary thriller. Set in the flailing comic industry of 1975, Secret Identity is a wildly entertaining, genre-bending story of secrets and superheroes, and features graphic novel art sequences throughout the book by artist Sandy Jarrell. For today's conversation, Alex chats with New York Times best-selling crime fiction writer Laura Lippman, creator of the Tess Monahan Private Eye series, hit standalone mysteries like Lady in the Lake and Sunburn, and the personal essay collection, My Life as a Villainess.
This book should work for everyone, right? It's about the comic industry in 1975, and I'd like you to explain what the comic industry was like in 1975.
Yeah, I think one of the main reason I picked 1975 was because it's so different from the comic book world we see today. Like everyone knows these characters now, and not even through comics. Like people know WandaVision because they watched the show, right. But in 1975, I think comics as a medium, at least superhero comics, were dying. There was no aftermarket. The things that people do today where they collect every issue and they buy them as they come out, there was no system in place for that. You went to the newsstand, and if Spider-Man was there, you picked up Spider-Man, and if not, you picked up Superman. And nobody was thinking about, phrases that we talk about so much today, like owning their IP, getting stuff optioned. It was just, you got paid a page rate and you drew the comic or you wrote the script, and then you moved on to the next thing. And that was that. It was very transient, and it was very much work for hire and very much pay as you go. There was no royalties or sense of publishing.
It's fascinating because you do learn a lot about how a comic is made. And I was interested in those kind of details. I wondered how much research you had to do about the 70s comics industry, because it has to be so different from the industry that you entered, barely 15 years ago.
I went into it thinking it wouldn't be that research intensive, and it ended up being like the most research intensive and the most like journalistic book I've ever written, in that Carmen, we have a lot of similarities, but we're different. So I wanted to speak to women that worked in comics at the time. I wanted to speak to editors that worked in the industry at the time. And I did a lot of reading and rereading of just history books, because it's a very unique period, because like I said, comics weren't really the media giant they are now. So there was not a lot of oversight. So if you wanted to go in and really alter a character and do something crazy, no one was really kind of managing you yet, because there were no toys, there were no movies, there were no TV. Aside from the Batman show in the 60s, there were no media demands or corporate synergy or things like that, things that are now so commonplace. But you could go in and write a character and really put your stamp on it.
To hear Alex talk about a group he supports, Crime Writers of Color, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
HEC Media, supporting and promoting the arts. Check out our features and shows on theater, dance, music, the visual arts, and more. Find this and all our award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
I'm Dave Ruggieri. I'm a local St. Louis artist, and I have 6 pieces in the Angad Arts Hotel, the replay show, and it runs until May 29th. Within each piece, I try to tie it back to what was important to me, some of the experiences, the things growing up. There's been a lot of pop culture references, and these are things that have been an important part of my life, right? You got like the Jordans. I remember having the original Jordans when I was in high school. This was before you would collect them, and I think the original Jordans now are going for about $25,000. And I had a pair. I'd cut the grass in them. We'd go to the lake in them and just destroy them, and there was no thought about it. And all those things really influenced me. People were being creative. They were pushing the edge. The internet was just coming of age, and all of these things was really just really important, and it kind of set the stage for my life. I have a bunch of different series, and some of them deal with topics that are more quote unquote important, and then all the way to the whimsical, right? So I have some pieces about endangered animals and endangered species like that, but I don't think art has to always tell this deep meaning. I think sometimes art can just be fun. It could just have a spark of fond memory, and it could just make you smile. But there's a lot of nostalgia in my work, and what I try to do is create pieces when people look at it, it brings them back to a specific place and time, right? As I get older now and music tastes change, I can see my grandpa and my dad saying, "Oh, turn that off, that's terrible," right? But the artists now are they're influencing these generations, right? And then they're going to help people build on it, and it's going to keep developing, and it's and that's always a good thing. It's a good thing to have people that do new things, that that push the boundaries, and that's kind of what I've been going for, right? I want to express myself and do it in my own unique way.
Replay is on display through May 29th. For a classroom-ready version of this video and over 100 artist profiles, all with activity ideas designed to ignite student creativity and inspire student learning, visit our educational website, educate.today.
First person, real world, expert driven. That's the focus of the videos, lesson plans, and activity ideas you'll find at our educational website, educate.today.
BioGenerator is a force for innovation in St. Louis. The people who are in the bioscience startup space inside BioGenerator labs have a chance to bring life-changing science to market. They are taking a shot at creating something new with far-reaching benefits for the improvement of health and quality of life across the globe.
Uniquely, BioGenerator is the only investor that invests exclusively in St. Louis companies. These are companies right here in the BioGenerator labs that are quite literally developing cures for cancer, tools to more quickly and more accurately detect cancer and other diseases, treatments for new ailments, vaccines, and sustainability in agriculture, as well as developing healthier foods like plant-based proteins, for example.
BioSTL's Director of Communication, Maggie Crane, works alongside startup companies supported by BioGenerator, the investment arm of BioSTL.
BioGenerator has about 50 companies that are active in its investment portfolio. These companies have gone on to raise a collective $2.2 billion in follow-on capital. It took nearly 2 decades for the BioGenerator portfolio to raise that first $1 billion. And in the past year alone, it's raised an additional $1 billion plus. That is incredibly impressive and really putting St. Louis on the map. And we know this because the majority of those investments are actually coming from outside of St. Louis. 94% to be exact, invested last year in 2021 in the BioGenerator portfolio.
Much of the recent success involves one company.
Benson Hill. It went public last year. It is an agriculture company that is developing higher protein soybeans that can then be turned into plant-based meat. When it went public on the New York Stock Exchange, it was valued at over $1 billion. There was a time when Benson Hill very first started here in St. Louis that BioGenerator paid to keep the lights on. It helped to pay the Ameren bill as well as to fund their staff to keep them going. They were down to their last nickel, and BioGenerator stepped in to float them to keep them going. So if you look back at early days of Benson Hill, it may not have happened. We may not have seen them on the New York Stock Exchange if it had not been for that very early de-risking money that BioGenerator put in. Every dollar that BioGenerator earns through its investments are plugged right back into the St. Louis innovation ecosystem to fund the next startup, to fund the next St. Louis bioscience idea, the next St. Louis innovation.
2021 proved successful in other ways. BioGenerator invested more than $3.3 million into 18 St. Louis startup companies. The promising new ventures are developing products in ag tech, therapeutics, medical devices, diagnostics, vaccines, and digital health.
St. Louis is really springboarding our entire metro area to the world stage because of our success in bioscience.
Crane is witnessing the growth of startups, and she's experiencing what that success means for St. Louis.
That's also something that's been neat for me personally, is that this is cool work. I literally have colleagues who are developing cures for cancer and new vaccines. It's impressive, and it's happening right here in St. Louis. And I think a lot of people don't know that. I love it.
Subsidized housing for artists, later on Spotlight.
We are here at Craft Alliance, and I'm really excited to open Other Ways of Knowing. In Other Ways of Knowing, in this exhibition, I was really considering the role that objects have played in my life, and ideas of identity construction, and ideas of being in the home or thinking more and more about what I interact with every day, and also the role that language plays in setting my expectations. I've brought a lot of sculptures of normal objects as a way to sort of think through both what those objects mean to me, what they might represent to someone else, and to sort of subvert expectations. So none of my objects function the way that they seem like they should, but it's hard to know what else to call it but a hat or a broom or a shower head. And I'm interested in what happens when, instead of looking at objects for their function, we start to think about what they could stand for, what their metaphors are, what other types of relationships or expectations we develop as humans who are so used to having tools at our disposal. I come from a background of making ceramic objects, and I feel like that was my introduction to art, was more a focus on individual objects. But I have deep interest in architecture and archaeology, and I built this whole exhibition around the idea of the home and ideas of homemaking and what it means to inhabit, and how home comes to reflect our own values, or maybe even our aspirations, or our histories, our past. So thinking about the relationship that I have to just my embodiment and to a real love for spaces and understanding space through myself. I am both presenting objects that I've made in the studio, and I'm using the gallery as another space of creation, or trying to transform the gallery into something more than just your basic white-walled space. So an example of a work that is made specifically for the exhibition here at Craft Alliance is called Slow Work for a Racing Heart. There's a large drawing, and applications of wet clay are added on top of that drawing. I made this piece in memory of my friend. So every time I do it, it's a one-time thing. It only exists for the duration of that specific exhibit, and I'm really excited to have it here as part of Other Ways of Knowing. So Other Ways of Knowing is up at Craft Alliance through May 21st, and you can find out more about the exhibition and what Craft Alliance does at craftalliance.org.
Scan the QR code on your screen to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Prison Performing Arts brings the arts to incarcerated individuals and allows for self-expression and healing. We meet the executive director, whose mission is to continue to build second acts through the arts.
I am John Walbers. As the new director, my hopes and dreams for the company would be helping with recovery from COVID, making sure that the incarcerated adults and justice-involved youth that we work with continue to get the great programming that we provide, continue to deepen the programming that we have, as we slowly, hopefully, start moving more and more into in-person programming, maybe branch into new facilities or adding new programming once we move out of this COVID world that we're all still inhabiting. Our motto is building second acts through the arts, and as a metaphor for plays, Act 1 is usually setting up the problem. The act ends with a big moment of crisis, and then Act 2 is resolving that, figuring out what happens next. And that's precisely what we aim to do with all of our participants, is providing them an opportunity to talk about, express the journey they've been on so far, and start visualizing the future that they want. I've actually been associated with Prison Performing Arts for a number of years as a freelancer. It began as an actor with a production of Or, produced by Slightly Askew Theater Ensemble. It was a 3-person show based on the life of Afra Ben, who, when the play begins, is in prison, and by the end of the play becomes basically one of England's poet laureates working for King Charles II. So it's a beautiful journey and arc of a real woman who was the first woman published in the English language. Over the years, started touring again as an actor, and then was hired as a teaching artist. Worked in the Arts and Healing program for inmates that are about to be released, helping them transition in their transition center, and then also writing curriculum. One of the things that I've learned about the actors themselves is never underestimate them. They are incredible. I think as a society, we neglect, ignore, and choose not to see incarcerated adults and justice-involved youth. We think of them as just sort of going away and they disappear, and that's absolutely not the case. There are so many people who are involved in the justice system, and most of them really are focusing on rehabilitation and bettering themselves. It was just a simple mistake or an unfortunate circumstance that put them where they are. And the only way to help them grow and reintegrate back into society in a successful way is to provide support and to provide safe places to express emotion, safe places to train themselves on how to speak in public, communication skills, express and navigate through all the trauma that being incarcerated involves. One of the most amazing things about performing in the spaces is the audiences are on their feet, they're clapping, they're cheering, they're egging you on, not just at the end of the show where, the traditional Fox clap, but they're so invested and so passionately dedicated to the story that you're sharing, because they don't get to see that very often, and especially live, in person. It's not on a screen, it's right there in front of them, and especially when they see their own stories reflected back to them, it gives them hope, it gives them inspiration. Prison Performing Arts is so dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, especially when it comes to race, gender identity, ability, and by providing opportunities for the entire gamut of people that we work with. Anyone can go to prison, anyone can be a justice-involved youth. They often say, what would happen if you were judged by your worst mistake in your life? And, there before the grace of God, how many of us have made a mistake once and regret it, but we still made those mistakes. And that's what's important, is giving those second chances, giving those opportunities for people to rebuild their lives.
You can find the stories featured in today's show, along with past episodes and more, at hecmedia.org/spotlight. This story is brought to you in partnership with STL Made.
I think that our biggest asset as a city, in a lot of ways, are our artists.
We believe that arts are the heart and soul of our city.
They are ambassadors of real life that happens here.
The St. Louis Art Place Initiative was a perfect place for us to impact artists where they already live and work, and to continue the mission of providing that core infrastructure.
So the Art Place Initiative is an artist housing opportunity. A lot of the documentation that is necessary, a lot of the requirements that are necessary for traditional home mortgages are just really difficult. They're really hard barriers for artists to overcome. So this gives a less intensive, dare I say, easier opportunity for an artist and their families to own a home in what I think is a really beautiful neighborhood.
One of the best things you can do for yourself and your stability and your future is to look into owning a home. We're hoping to not only help artists build wealth and resources, but to also create a benefit for the neighborhood by rooting those artists in a neighborhood in a way that they become an intentional part of the fabric and involved in the day-to-day goings-on of a community.
We brought the arts, funding, and kind of arts infrastructure development, arts-based community development hat into affordable housing. Artists are going to be able to enter into a home with $1,000 down at a 2.5% interest rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage for a home that otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford. We've built these mechanisms to ensure not only do they have the direct relationships, but we've also ensured that the community kind of governs the process.
These homes provide an opportunity for artists to set down roots in a way that's stabilizing for their practice. It can be very challenging to kind of have a consistent artistic practice when you don't know if you'll have a space renewed, when your lease is up. Future homeowners will have the opportunity to kind of really dig into their careers as artists because they have these homes to build off of.
And we hope that the Art Place Initiative helps continue the vision of that neighborhood, but also ensures that an artist will always be able to afford to live there in perpetuity.
I know a lot of St. Louis artists, and many of them don't know how not to be community connected and community involved. I absolutely know that they're going to extend their community care to that place.
There's no other place in the nation that has the type of rich cultural density, affordability, infrastructure in the way that it has, and then also a legacy and a history that can't be denied. And the more we can do to support the arts right now, the more the arts will be able to do to support us.
I'm hoping that with this, we have people who love St. Louis, adding to the beauty of the community and the people there, and that it spreads, germinates out, not just in Gravois Park, but in other neighborhoods.
Visit thestl.com for more stories like this one. Next week, we'll take you to one of the most unique markets in the country. Plus, a memorial art exhibit, why this started with a blue door. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.